Hello, I'm Ella or Elizabeth, and I'll probably keep my sunglasses on because I am on vacation and I just came back from the pool. But today I'm going to be presenting on a natural disaster that occurred in my home country, the earthquake of Sakhalin in 1995. And before this class and presentation, I was actually unaware of earthquakes in Russia, or at least I never heard of them before in the news, which makes sense since we live in California and we have enough of our own earthquakes to report on. But anyways, I was born in more northern Siberia, and all I know from that is that it gets pretty cold there in winter. No earthquakes though. And the earthquake I will discuss today will be one that occurred in Russia's Far East region in eastern Siberia, an earthquake that was so bad that it wiped out an entire town of people on its island. Okay, so I don't know if that works. Fun. Sorry, guys, I have no idea. Okay, so the table of contents. This is what we're going to discuss today. The picture on the right is a memorial that was put up in the city of Neftogorsk, which is the city that we're going to be talking about, to commemorate the earthquake's damage and to those who were killed. So as you can see, the epicenter of the quake happened here in the star with the circle, in the red circle, and it shows how big the aftershocks were. So this is a picture of the map of the island off of Russia where disaster struck in the early morning of May in 1995 at 1:04 a.m. local time. It is still known to be the most destructive earthquake known within the current territory of Russia, with a magnitude of 7.6 and maximum Mercalli intensity of, geez, is that 9 or 11? Anyways, it's violent. And also important to mention that this island is closer to Japan than it is to Russia. And Sakhalin is separated from the mainland of Russia by the narrow and shallow Strait of Tartary. So the earthquake devastated the oil town of Nizhegorsk, where 1,900 of its 3,900 citizens were killed and another 750 were injured. The wrath of nature wiped out the town of Nizhegorsk in just 17 seconds, burying more than 2,000 people under the rubble. That's 2/3 of the population. 90% of the victims were killed by the collapse of 19 five-story residential buildings. Many non-residential buildings did not collapse, but since it occurred at 1 a.m. in the early morning, many were trapped in the residential buildings. Also, super sad fact, but common with building collapses was after some hours of working and rescuing all the machinery, everything was turned off just to listen to any noises of people trapped in the air pockets of rubble. Super sad. And as it turns out, that Neftogorsk was never rebuilt, while surviving inhabitants were relocated to other towns and cities across the region. So I'm not going to play the video now, but I'll include it down in the forum. Warning, it's super sad. The video recollects survivors being dragged out of rubble and families torn apart by the disaster with missing members. Translation is included in the video's description, and I was also reading some articles of firsthand experiences, and I definitely teared up a couple of times. It's all just so sad and definitely mentally damaging to the survivors. I'll also include that below. And so the tectonic setting of the chosen region. So it turns out the earthquakes on the eastern side of Russia are actually considered a very seismically dangerous region. Underground tremors are quite frequent and cause much structural damage to buildings and roads. Truly strong earthquakes, however, are extremely rare. This earthquake occurred near a poorly known tectonic plate boundary where the Okhotsk plate connected with North America plate is crashing into the Amurian plate, which is part of the Eurasian plate. And this indicates that the plate boundary is associated with a north-south striking seismic belt that runs the length of Sakhalin. It's also a right lateral strict slip motion. More precisely, the earthquake occurred on the upper Pilton fault, also known as the Gyriglin-Osoy fault, which branches off the main Sakhalin Hokkaido fault that runs along the east side of the island into Japan. And what we know about the geologic setting is that the landform is an island and has many mountains. The geology and tectonics of the region are not well known since the surface is mostly covered in young sediments and basement rocks are not exposed. So there's two parallel ranges of mountains that traverse it from north to south, as well as many volcanoes reside here and on nearby islands, such as Kuroi, gosh, how do you say it? Kuroi Islands, I believe. And crystalline rocks crop out at several capes, Cretaceous limestones containing, Cretaceous limestones containing an abundant and specific fauna of gigantic ammonites occur at Douai on the west coast. And there's tertiary conglomerates, sandstones, marls, and clays folded by subsequent upheavals appear in many parts of the island. The clays, which contain layers of good coal and abundant fossil vegetation, shown that during the Miocene period, Sakhalin formed part of the continent that comprised of northern Asia, Alaska, and Japan, and enjoyed a comparatively warm climate. And the Pleistocene deposits contain a mollusk fauna more Arctic than that which exists at its present time. So the cause of this geologic hazard. The earthquake resulted in factories that crumbled and then led to fires that broke out. Again, to mention, this is an oil town. And the quake fractured a 60-mile stretch of oil pipeline leading north from Neftegorsk to the city of Oka, 43 miles away. And then 35 kilometers or 22 miles of surface rupture was observed with an estimated average lateral displacement of about 4 meters, but up to 8 meters or 9 yards in some places. This compares to the 14-kilometer of slip estimated to have accumulated on the Sakhalin Hokkaido fault in the last 4 million years. And while Western media generally attributed the collapse to allegedly poor construction and shoddy materials of Soviet era construction, a geotechnical study faulted a failure to accommodate the possibility of soil liquidation in an area that was considered practically aseismic. So earthquakes of magnitudes greater than 6 were not known to occur in the area of northern Sakhalin Island where this earthquake happened. And the unusual strength of this quake and length of rupturing and low level of seismic activity beforehand has been attributed to the accumulation of strain over a long period of time on a locked fault segment. And of course, although the known history is less than 100 years. So an earthquake that happened nearby Japan that was still recovering from the Kobe quake that killed more than 5,000 people in January of 1995. Sent condolences and offered assistance. Sakhalin is actually just north of Japanese islands of Hokkaido. Was plagued by much smaller monthly earthquakes before the devastating 6.6 hit the Russian island of Sakhalin. And aftershocks of 3.0 magnitude jolted the island a few days later, rushing rescue teams from all over eastern Russia to help. And the event started with a relatively short rupture, 11% of the total seismic moment, located west of the center of the main fault. After 1.2 seconds, bilateral rupture propagation began along the main fault, first towards the south and then towards the north. Finally, the last segment oriented northwest broke at the northern end of the main fault. The total time duration of the main part of the source was short because bilateral rupture propagation permits sub-events to overlap in time. So what did geologists learn about this event? Officials of the country allocated 30 billion rubles or 5.9 million for emergency relief, although total damage was at 64 to $300 million. And judging by the nature of the destruction and potential number of victims, this is the worst earthquake known to Russia. With the post-Soviet economy and collapse, nothing has been done to remedy known architectural defects, let alone improve seismic safety, unfortunately. And the quake on Sakhalin was actually not totally unexpected. In February of 1995, so the earthquake happened in May, but in February, the Ministry of Emergencies released a report saying that there was an 80 to 85% likelihood of a violent earthquake in the Russia Far East in the next 3 years. But the report said the quake was most likely to occur on the Kamchatka Peninsula across the Sea of both coasts from Sakhalin, or more in the northern Kuril Islands. Moreover, no earthquake of such large magnitude had ever reported at the site of Neftegorsk earthquake, and the event was unfortunately totally unexpected. So the region generally experiences several weak earthquakes a year, grade 3 to 4, which should not cause any serious damage. Moderate earthquakes, grade magnitude 5 to 6, occur 10 to 25 times per 100 years. Intensity 7 earthquakes occur 4 to 6 times per 100 years. And 8 to 9 magnitude earthquakes can happen 1 to 3 times in a century. And yeah, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening and bearing with me this whole time. If you have any questions, feel free to leave in the forum, and I'd love to get back to that. Thank you.